Hello, children. The time has finally come where I do an analysis on fictional characters from the College of He Breathed, and I wrote a thesis. Today's victim, Asaba Harumasa. To be honest, he was one of the characters that pulled me into ZZZ, knowing he has the same Japanese voice actor as Scaramouche, and their similar bratty attitude I saw floating around on Twitter. Listen, both being betrayed and abandoned more than once, they both enjoy bitter food and catboy personas. I did not connect any dots, but either way, I was like,
another test subject.
A disclaimer as always, this video is not meant to dictate how you should perceive the character, but rather to open new perspectives in the discussion revolving around them. Now, I know some of you never played ZZZ before, or skipped every cutscene and went straight to gooning. It's okay. Lore's not for everyone, and not everyone has taste, no offense. So, who the hell is Asaba Harumasa? Well, firstly, he's a member of the Hollow Special Operations Section 6, aka Section 6. It's basically a special squad formed to deal with Hollow incidents without all the corporate bullshit from tops. But somehow, they've also got fan bases like their idols.
Lady Miyabi, please step on me!
Harumasa Master! My heart has something to say!
Sokaku! Dog, wanna be my... No, that came out all wrong. Woof.
Harumasa is a child prodigy, a genius even. Climbed the ranks fast. He sounds like he's a real grinder, but the truth is, bro is kinda allergic to effort, especially when it comes to work. He shows up to work late, just to warm the furniture and takes naps, even in front of his superiors. Booked and busy? No, bro is booked and sleepy. He doesn't even try to hide how he wants to slack off and take sick leaves more than you see your family. The crazy part is that he's not even pretending to care, and still somehow clears missions, and I kinda envy him. But let's be real for a second. Is he actually lazy? Or is that just what we're supposed to think? Because the game doesn't just suggest it, it commits to the bit. He's always on leave, sighs like standing up a physical pain. It's the perfect setup. The textbook lazy character. He knocks once instead of twice when meeting proxy. Like even door etiquette is too much effort. You're not supposed to take him seriously. You're supposed to laugh, say mood, or me as fuck, and move on. And at first, you don't question it. Because every game has that one guy, the slacker, the one who shows up late, does the bare minimum, and still gets paid. And Harumasa fits the mold perfectly, almost too perfectly. Here's the thing though, it's not just us. The people around him didn't know what was really going on. Even his own teammates bought into the slacker image. Every time he disappeared it was like, oh, Harumasa's probably faking another sick day. But soon enough, it was revealed that while he was faking his sickness on his leave, he is actually ill with a terminal health condition he was born with, which is ether aptitude regression syndrome. Yeah. Not exactly something you shake off with a nap. It is a rare condition where someone has an abnormally high ether aptitude, but their body literally can't handle it. It's like having too much power in a system that was never built to contain it. Your ether aptitude level is off the charts, which should make you adapt into Hollows easier. But instead of turning you into some combat god, it slowly eats away at your body. Even worse, eventually turning into an ethereal in the late stages. In Harumasa's case, it targets his lungs and heart, and since it's a rare condition, it has yet to have a cure. So yeah, all those sighs, naps, the way he acts like he's at 5% battery, that's just how he functions now. And the worst part, he never really tells anyone. But it gets even darker. Because Harumasa wasn't just quietly suffering from a rare illness, he was being used because of it when he was a kid. You see, ether aptitude regression syndrome doesn't just make you sick, it makes you valuable to the wrong people. Harumasa and others like him were used to develop illegal ether booster drugs. These drugs were made from patients' spinal fluid extraction and designed to artificially enhance one's ether aptitude, but the side effects were completely mentally unstable. And in his agent's story, we find out he wasn't just laying low. While everyone thought he was skipping work, Harumasa was quietly investigating the truth about his past and condition. He personally dug into the same underground research that experimented on him for the illegal ether booster drugs. He traced the network, reopened the case, and even managed to arrest some of the key figures involved. And eventually, his squad finds out, but not because he told them. Nah, because bro almost died and it was Proxy who called them in behind his back. That was the first time they saw him for what he was, and probably for us too. Suddenly, all those sick leaves, all the naps, it all started making sense. Because the illness isn't just there, it's actively wearing him down. His condition, the illegal research he'd been subjected to, the quiet investigation he'd been conducting the whole time, made something shifted. His co-workers, once annoyed or indifferent, began to see the weight he carried. And this is where the game hits hardest. This change of perspective isn't just for the characters around him, it's also for us, because we misjudged him too. The game doesn't just reveal Harumasa's truth, it reflects ours, how quick we are to label, how easy it is to reduce someone to the parts we see. A reminder that what we call detachment might just be someone surviving in silence, and that sometimes the hardest battles are the ones no one sees. But even with the revelations about his illness and the underground investigation to explain about his absence and slacking off, it still feels like we're only scratching the surface. Does knowing his diagnosis suddenly make all the pieces fall into place? Does uncovering his personal mission suddenly justify all the times he seemed distant, unreliable? Not really. The storyline itself is fairly straightforward, sure. I've seen people talk about how the signs were so obvious that you could tell he had ears way before the reveal. But focusing on hints like that misses the more crucial point. The reveal isn't there to reward players for guessing right. If anything, it raises more questions. What does it do to a person to be treated like a tool, not a child? What are the causes when survival means staying invisible? It's not just what he went through, it's how it shaped him, how it rewired his relationship with work, with people, with the idea of being seen. It's where we look deeper. Maybe it wasn't just the illness. Maybe it wasn't just the covert mission. Maybe there are reasons even he can't fully articulate. I say this because there are inconsistencies of his behavior from the past and present, which felt very important to acknowledge. A child prodigy? A genius? Even that fuck-ass Kirishima who doesn't give a damn about him also acknowledged Harumasa was a diligent and hard-working kid. It's also not just between his past and present, but within the present itself. On one hand, he's exhausted and yet he still throws himself into missions and pushes past his limits. He's selfless in ways people barely notice, such as taking the fall when no one asks him to, saying the most cringe-ass heroic lines first just to protect others, which made him turn into a bang boo. That was kinda cute though. To me, that's a fake id-gafer. What happened? That's where the game does something subtle. It doesn't hand us a perfect answer. It doesn't reduce Harumasa to a single explanation. Instead, it leaves us with the discomfort of not knowing. And that, to me, made me itch to lay the possibilities. So, let us first talk about his childhood. The boy who learned far too early what it meant to be discarded. Harumasa wasn't just born with ether aptitude regression syndrome. He was abandoned because of it. His parents made the decision to leave him behind in the hospital. And while we're not told exactly why, the implication is clear. He was too fragile, too complicated, too much to deal with. Maybe they were scared. Maybe they thought someone else could give him a better life. But to a child, none of that matters. All that stays is the fact that he was left.
Back when I was first diagnosed, my parents took me to the best hospital in the city. They told me they'd get some food for me while we waited. But they never came back. I was too little to even speak properly then. But even if I knew where home was, there was no going back.
And that kind of abandonment doesn't just fade with time. It doesn't just hurt. It forms a story you begin to tell yourself about who you are and the way you imagine others see you, that you're a problem. When your first experience of love ends in rejection, it plants a seed of doubt that maybe your presence is inherently inconvenient, that maybe the more honest version of you, the one that's vulnerable, in pain, in need, isn't worth keeping around. And just when he began to build something again, it happened a second time. After being left by his parents, Harumasa was taken in by his master.
He taught me a lot of things, like how to draw a bow, how to wield a blade, and how to survive in this world with this body of mine. He said he wanted to cure me. So every day, I took lots of meds and got injections in the back of my neck. It wasn't until much later I realized they weren't giving me shots, but extracting materials from me to make the booster drug.
But what he also didn't know was that his master eventually stopped his experiments. He started working on a real cure, specifically for Harumasa. And that's probably what got him killed, as the people behind it realized he wasn't following orders anymore. But none of that mattered back then. Because before any of that came to light, his master disappeared without a return. And to Harumasa, that was all that mattered. Someone he trusted left him, just like everyone else. In that echo of the first abandonment, the belief settles deeper. Because when someone leaves you once, you feel broken. When someone leaves you again, you stop blaming them. You start blaming yourself. The pattern becomes the proof. It must be me. It must be something about who I am. Something unfixable. Something that pushes people away the moment I need them most. And this is where the Harumasa we meet begins to make sense. Not as a slacker, but as someone who expects loss before it even arrives. Someone who pulls back because being close has only ever led to pain. He doesn't ask for help because history has already shown him what happens when he does. He doesn't explain himself because no one stuck around long enough to hear it the first time. And we see this play out in the game. Harumasa never really talks about his condition. Even with Proxy, someone he clearly trusts to some degree, he keeps things vague. He offers bits and pieces when pressed, but never lays everything on the table. Throughout the story, he continues to dodge the full truth, deflecting with jokes or downplaying what he's going through. It's not until much later, when his condition visibly deteriorates during a mission, that the cracks begin to show. We learn he had recently used his own spinal fluid to help the children suffering from the same illness, were exploited for their bodies to produce illegal ether booster drugs. That act, done quietly and at great personal cost, nearly breaks him. And it's only when Proxy threatens to stop helping him, unless he finally explains what's going on, that he relents and tells the truth. That kind of disclosure doesn't come from trust. It comes from necessity and, sadly, fear. The fear of being a burden again and driving people away. If he's discarded once, he starts to believe his existence is a problem. But when it happens again, in the exact same way, that belief stops being a fear. To him, it becomes fact. And once that belief takes hold, it begins to shape everything. Growing up, Harumasa wasn't just isolated emotionally, he was avoided. He believes his illness made people uneasy. They didn't know how to act around him, so they kept their distance. Whether out of fear, pity, or discomfort, the result was the same. He was abandoned. That kind of social rejection, especially in early child development, does something to you. It teaches you that your presence makes people uncomfortable. That just being seen, just being yourself, is too much. And so, long before Harumasa learned how to deflect with sarcasm, he had already internalized this lesson. People fear what they don't understand, and that fear turns into distance. This fear of being misread, feared, and pushed away is at the heart of one of the most haunting moments in the trailer. As voices echo through a crowded street, Harumasa hears people call him a monster. Children point. Parents pull them away.
Monster? That's a monster. Who are you talking about? No, I'm not a monster. I'm not. I didn't hurt anyone. It wasn't me.
He pleads that he is none of those accusations, but it doesn't matter. No one listens. They've already decided what he is. And then comes the moment when the message flashes. That scene is more than just memory or metaphor. It's a mirror, a reflection of how Harumasa sees himself, shaped by the repeating abandonment he experiences as a child. It's the culmination of a lifetime of being told, directly or indirectly, that his presence makes people uncomfortable. The trailer implies that he's dangerous, unwanted, and a monster. Yet these visions only repeat in his nightmares, quietly pointing to a deeper truth, that this is how he fears he's seen, not necessarily how others see him. So of course, he keeps his distance. It's not just secrecy, it's self-preservation. Because when you've spent your whole life being mistreated, you stop trying to correct anyone. You just learn to live with the mask. The tragedy is that people don't see Harumasa for who he is, because he doesn't let them. And it's because no one ever made it safe for him to be seen. Which brings us back to how we first met him. His slacker image isn't who he is, it's who he tries to become to protect himself. Not just a persona, but also a defense mechanism to hide his true self. What looks like laziness is really the outcome of survival. To someone who's been punished just for existing differently, doing nothing feels safer, and being dismissed as lazy is easier to live with than being seen as born different, where every action might invite scrutiny. Being called a coward by a former colleague, he feeds into that label, because in his mind, being dismissed for what he isn't hurts less than being hated for what he fears he actually is, for the monster he believes he might be. It's the type of self-rejection rooted in internalized fear and shame.
Don't worry, my condition is mild. I'm not gonna die that easily. You know what they say. The bad guys always live the longest.
Don't say that about yourself. You're not a bad guy.
And this is why it becomes clear, as I mentioned earlier, that his illness was never the full story. It's easy to assume his exhaustion, his detachment, his so-called laziness all stem from his condition, but that doesn't hold up when you look closer. Harumasa wasn't always like this. Despite his born sickness, he was once praised as a genius, diligent. Even Chief Miyabi, someone who had every reason to doubt him, called him the strongest candidate to join Section 6, despite being rejected before due to his health issues. There are people who saw his potential and believed in it. That version of him wasn't imagined, it was real. So if the ability was always there, what changed? The answer isn't just in his body, it's in everything that happens around it. The abandonment, the fear, the guilt, the belief that no matter how much he gives, people will still walk away. This was further reinforced by the way others remembered him before. Like the offhand comment from Anon, when he was a child, he was full of enthusiasm for everything, if it weren't for his master. Which only proves the point that his condition didn't erase who he truly was. Something else did. I'm not just pulling this out of my ass, even though I kinda think I am, but overall, neglect screws with how people develop their sense of self. Not in a dramatic, I'm angry at the world way, but in a quiet, internal way. Like kids who grow up emotionally abandoned often end up with this warped view of themselves. They don't act out. They just fade. One heavily cited paper literally said that neglect may impede the overall development of self. Like they don't even get the chance to believe there's someone worth being. Even if this analysis is built on what-ifs, it still reflects something real. Perhaps Harumasa's character is an exaggeration for the funsies. Maybe he's meant to be brushed off and overlooked, but that part feels too real to ignore. The story doesn't have to spell it out for it to mean something. And I guess that's probably why the story hit the way it does. Not just about what Harumasa carries, but how familiar it all feels. The thing about abandonment is that no one really teaches you how to deal with it, especially when we were young. We're not given the tools to process it, even when support exists. It often lacks the development needed to adapt to the different experiences and contexts people go through. That's why the needs of abandoned children are so often overlooked, even though thousands are affected every year. We just learn to move on, or at least pretend to. And abandonment usually brings in the guilt and shame that we internalize. And it's not just a story thing. In reality, children who experience parental rejection or abandonment are more prone to intense shame and guilt, even when the blame was never theirs to carry. In fact, kids raised in institutional care show significantly higher levels of shame compared to those raised in family settings. Not because they're weaker, but because the loss of love and care leaves a scar that says, "You were the problem." And still, we don't talk much about it, or rather, do not know how to, because shame is ugly, it's uncomfortable. So instead of unpacking it, we bury it. We mask it with detachment. Not only through silence, but probably with self-deprecation, with jokes. We pretend we don't care. And maybe that's why sometimes the second someone asks, "Are you okay?" we feel like we're about to break, because it touches something we've kept quiet for too long. And when shame has already taken root, it doesn't take much to reinforce it, especially when we're sick or struggling, or just not functioning the way people expect us to. Because we've built a world where productivity is the default measure of worth. If you can't keep up, people assume the problem is you. If your symptoms aren't visible, they assume you're exaggerating. If you need more rest, more time, more space, they call you lazy. And we also see people like Harumasa all the time. The quiet ones, the ones who don't respond, who cancels plans, who misses deadlines, who drifts away. And we label them negatively without ever asking what they're carrying. We hardly wonder what made them withdraw, or who taught them it wasn't safe to be seen. Maybe it's someone you know. A friend who used to show up until they didn't. A student who once excelled, now barely making it through. And maybe if you're honest, it's been you too. You were once passionate, driven, full of energy, and now you don't even recognize yourself. Harumasa's story forces us to sit with that discomfort. It reminds us that sometimes what looks like laziness is just someone trying not to fall apart. That detachment might be grief. That silence might be shame, but beneath the surface, there's almost always more. A pain that didn't have a name. People surviving in ways that don't always look like trying. The story also implies how we treat illness like it should come with obvious signs. We expect disability to look a certain way. We think burnout can be fixed with a weekend off. And when someone doesn't recover on our timeline, we stop being understanding. We start resenting them for making us uncomfortable. But that's not all. The moment his condition is revealed, everything about him is suddenly explained. The missed duty, the naps, the disappearing acts, they all get wrapped up in that one word, sick. And while that's true, the danger is in how quickly everyone accepts it, as if his illness alone accounts for everything. But that's what we do. We reduce people to the part that's easiest to understand. Once someone is labeled sick, we start projecting weakness, fragility, failure. We stop seeing who they used to be, or who they still are, underneath it all. Their ambition, their drive, their strength, all of it gets blurred out. We treat the diagnosis like a conclusion, not a context. It overlooks the emotional weight beneath it all, the shame, the silence, the coping mechanisms people develop just to stay afloat. Illness doesn't explain the whole person, and it doesn't account for everything that came before it. The experiences that shaped how they learned to survive in the first place. But hey, one thing about Harumasa is that he never truly lost who he really is. After nearly dying and preparing himself to disappear, he comes back, not as someone transformed, but someone finally at peace with who he is. He accepts that some things won't heal, like he's still slacking off and taking naps during work hours, that his master may have hurt him and cared for him at the same time. Because sometimes people who shaped you, the ones who taught you, raised you, maybe even saved you, were also the ones who hurt you the most. Parents, mentors, friends, lovers, anyone. It's not always clean. Some people showed you love and still left scars. Some people meant well and still did damage. But both things can be true, and that duality is hard to hold. But Harumasa doesn't try to resolve it. He doesn't need to. Acceptance for him isn't about justifying what happened. It's about acknowledging that it did and learning how to live with it. He understands now that life doesn't sort itself into clean categories of good or bad. It just is. And he's not looking for forgiveness. He's not trying to be seen or validated. He's just ready to live again on his own terms. And that's the real miracle. Not that he survived, but that he finally believes he's allowed to. So, let Harumasa be a little reminder, not that healing is always possible, but that being here still matters, even if you're tired, even if you're not ready, even if you're still figuring it out. And if you grew up without the kind of love or support you needed, if the people who were supposed to care for you didn't, or did it in a way that hurt, you're not alone in that. A lot of people were taught that love had to be earned, or that they had to be useful to be wanted. Just because you didn't get enough back then doesn't mean you don't deserve it now. You still do. You don't have to be fixed to deserve to exist. And sometimes just staying is enough. Hope you enjoyed my short analysis on him and tried my best to keep it short. Do let me know if you're interested to dive in more topics about him or another character. Don't forget to like and subscribe, ooh woo, and I will see you in the next video. Goodbye for now.